looking, throwing in the end zone.
Montana, touchdown, John Taylor.
Young to the air, Young to Jerry Rice, touchdown San Francisco.
Young stumbles on the way back and fires up the middle. Pass is caught by Owens.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm your host, Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis, plus timely and entertaining sports and pop culture topics. And today, we're going to be still going over last week's victory over the Steelers with Pro Football Focus's highest and lowest graded offensive and defensive players, along with some key snap counts. We're going to give thoughts from some key players about the game. Head coach Kyle Shanahan on keeping players out there longer than I would have liked. The 49ers worked out some players this week. We're going to be talking Madden cover athletes, something you might not know, and preview the Week 2 game at the Los Angeles Rams. In the plus section, we're going to be talking about New York Giants and New York Jets misery, diving into the Aaron Rodgers injury. We're going to be talking the next iteration of the classic show Inside the NFL. Star Wars Ahsoka Episode 5 dropped 2 days ago on Disney+. I have some thoughts about that, and we will conclude with Week 2 NFL picks. But like always, it starts with the 49ers, so let's get right into it.
Let's talk Niners.
So I like to provide Pro Football Focus's highest and lowest graded players. I did this last year, and the fact that this information kind of comes out usually on late Monday or Tuesday, and since the first podcast drops on a Monday recapping Sunday's game, I thought this would be a good way of leading off the podcast on Thursday. So on offense, as you might imagine, Brandon Ayuk, the highest graded at 92.9. McCaffrey behind him at 74.6. Brock Purdy, 73.2. Trent Williams, 70.7. And then Ray McLeod at 70.5, although he only played 3 offensive snaps. On defense, Nick Bosa, the late signee, led the way, 85.5. Cleveland Farrell, defensive end running mate, 84.5. Kevin Givens at D-tackle, 83.8. Javon Hargrave, D-tackle, 83.7. And Drake Jackson, who had 3 sacks, 82.3. Interestingly enough, on defense, Fred Warner was the lowest graded 49er player. And can you guess who was the lowest rated offensive player? It wasn't Colton McKivitz. It was offensive guard, who lines up next to him, Spencer Burford, who had a 28.6 rating. Colton McKivitz, a 45.0. And as I talked about last podcast, did it look great for McKivitz and the O-line week 1? For McKivitz, no. For the O-line in general, pretty decent. McKivitz will have better days going up against TJ Watt, a former defensive player of the year, is a tall task. And Kyle Shanahan came out and said in an interview, we could have done a better job helping him, chipping him, putting a tight end to that side. I'm not sure how that wasn't a foundational part of the game plan, knowing that Watt was probably going to rush over McKivitz for most of the game. They're going to have a similar problem this week against the Rams, and we're going to get into that. But McKivitz is going to perform better. If he allows 3 sacks a game, he will be out of there before the month of September is up, right? Like, TJ Watt caused those issues. He is a premier top 3 pass rusher in the league. A lot of offensive tackles will struggle with that, and hopefully this is something that McKivitz can grow into. Remember, he hasn't gotten consistent reps really ever, and I don't think he started more than 2 or 3 games consecutively. This is going to be a big deal for him, and if he can stay healthy, you'd imagine he's going to be better in October than he will be in September. Now, let's look at snap counts, because I touched upon this lightly on Monday. So 68 total snaps for the offense. Christian McCaffrey was in there for 58 of them. Eli Mitchell, 10. So that represents your running back snaps. Too high for McCaffrey. Maybe a little bit low for Mitchell. I would love to see Mitchell get maybe around 15, and then you can bring Jordan Mason in for, say, 5 to 8 snaps. 58 is way too high. We're going to get into the reason why in a few minutes, right from the mouth of Kyle Shanahan. At tight end, Kittle with 47 snaps, so even coming off of the groin injury, played well more than half the snaps, followed by Charlie Werner and Ross Dwelly. Again, with Kittle limited with the injury, even though he played most of the snaps, 0 production from any other tight end. And Kittle, I think, only had 3 receptions for 19 yards anyway. At receiver, or say the tertiary receivers plus, Juwan Jennings, 22 snaps. Rookie Ronnie Bell with 8. On defense, 63 total snaps. Diamador Lenore led the way for the cornerbacks. Interestingly enough, it wasn't Charvarius Ward. It was Lenore with 55 snaps, then Charvarius Ward with 51. Next came Ambry Thomas with 34 and Isaiah Oliver with 33. Last podcast, I mentioned that they were in the 40s. That includes special teams. This is solely defensive snaps. At defensive end, again, late signee Nick Bosa, they wanted him to be between 30 and 40 snaps. He was at 35, and he led the way. Cleveland Ferrell was next with 31. Drake Jackson with 28. Kerry Hyder with 16. And recently cut, but signed to the practice squad and elevated for week 1 defensive end, Austin Bryant with 16 snaps as well. And let's just conclude with the defensive tackles. Free agent prize, Javon Hargrave, 41 snaps. Eric Armstead, 41. Javon Kinlaw, 24. And Kevin Givens, 20. So let's move from snaps to thoughts from players. And this was Bosa talking about the defensive line. Quote, I kind of say this every year just because of how confident I am in our front office and coaches and the players that we have. But adding Javon Hargrave and Cleveland Ferrell and a few of the other guys, I just knew that we were going to be back talent-wise to 2019. Or I think better even with depth. It was tough not to be a part of it during training camp because every year we're expecting to go the whole way. 2019, remember, was Bosa as a rookie, who had a good rookie year, but was not, was the defensive rookie of the year, but not to the defensive player of the year level he was at last year. You had a younger Eric Armstead, you had DeForest Buckner, who's now gonna be replaced by Javon Hargrave, and you had D Ford with some rotations, but that's gonna be replaced by Cleveland Ferrell and Hyder and Drake Jackson. They don't have the pure speed edge rusher that D Ford was, independent of the injuries and the back. He was the speed off the edge. Bosa, can convert speed to power well, but D Ford was the getting around the tackle, bending into him, and really maybe getting to the quarterback, not untouched, pushed, but you're not really blocking, chest to chest the way that sometimes Nick Bosa or especially an interior pass rusher would be. Austin Bryant might be the closest to that. It could have been Drake Jackson last year, but I think he put on 15 to 20 pounds. That's got to affect speed somewhat, so he's going to be a bit more of a power rusher. So that's why that I in a way, I wanted Austin Bryant still on the roster. Kerry Hyder's 32, versatile inside, outside, and Cleveland Ferrell, while a good pass rusher and a top 5 pick the year Bosa came out in 2019, he's more of an edge setter. Can he get to the quarterback? Sure. But he hasn't shown that productivity yet, and I'm sure his numbers will take a jump just given the amount of talent that's on the defensive line. So a tall task, what, the 2019 team brought, but a good start against Pittsburgh with 5 sacks of Kenny Pickett. Now let's jump to the offensive line with Trent Williams talking about Brock Purdy. Quote, you see it. We voted him a team captain. Obviously, you see how he played today. You can't tell that he was hurt. So we're proud of Brock, man. He took everything in stride, and he's become our leader, become a quarterback that we can lean on. That's why he's got that C on his chest. The sample size, everyone, is still small, right? 9 games in total. But you have to be super excited about what Brock Purdy has shown. On social media, people are, not that they're anointing him the next great quarterback or the next Montana, but I've seen pictures of Montana in the background and Purdy in the foreground. And I just caution everyone to be excited that football's back. It's awesome to devote 3 hours and 20 minutes to your favorite team a day. And I'll be watching the Thursday night game tonight, the Sunday night game, 2 Monday night games. We'll get into that in the plus section, which I think is ridiculous this week. But he's shown so much in these 9 games, so much more than Trey Lance has shown in his 4 games, than Alex Smith showed in his first 2 years. There's reasons to be excited, much like when Kaepernick was taking the league by storm. However you want to feel about his politics and the kneeling, and he's not really in the league anymore. We're going to get into that, even though he wants to come back into the league. When he was running like a gazelle and winning playoff games and beating the Packers twice and getting to the Super Bowl, although they didn't throw Randy Moss one jump ball against the Raiders, and I can't figure that out. He just had his eyes locked on Michael Crabtree. It was exciting thinking the 49ers had their next franchise quarterback. And just as quickly as Kaepernick exploded on the scene, 2014, 15, 16 fizzled out, and Shanahan and company did not ask him back when they took over. Not to say that Purdy would go that way, but it's very early to tell. But we've seen so many great things, and his team has bought in. This is not a Zach Wilson situation with the Jets. I mean, Purdy's married or engaged, so he's not going to be banging anybody's mom the way Zach Wilson is, but there's a risk. You're the CEO of the team on the field, right? In the quarterback position. You need to have the respect of the team. You need the team to believe every time they're in the huddle, they have a chance for a first down, a big play, a touchdown, a comeback to win. The quarterback affects the demeanor and morale and intensity of those around them. We always talk about quarterbacks that elevate the play around them. I don't know if Brock Purdy is there yet. I mean, let's everybody slow their roll, but the arrow is pointing in the right direction. Now, Trent Williams did have, I don't think this was throwing shade, as the youngsters say, but he just made an offhanded, lighthearted statement, and I'll give you the quote. At one point, you just kind of wanted the Steelers to get a first down. There were all those 3 and outs, and we kind of needed a break, meaning the offense. 5 straight consecutive 3 and outs, whether on punts or an interception. I could see how that can make an offense tired. I mean, he's not rooting against his team, rooting for the Steelers to get a first down, but a first down or 2 and a punt, little bit of a breather. He's what, 33, 34 years old, 320 pounds? That I can understand that. I weigh, a little more than half that, and I need a breather sometimes just going up and down stairs. So totally understand that. Interesting point that he made, but that's the price you pay when you have a defense that was playing that dominant for the first, really, 28 minutes of the first half. Now, Kyle Shanahan was asked by the media, why did you keep your players out there that long? And I addressed my theory on it on the last podcast, and one of the few times in my life that I was right. If you ask my wife, it's probably the only time in my life that I was right. But it was because of the lead, and there was still some shell shock from the Week 1 game against the Lions in 2021. Now, here's Shanahan's quote. Trust me, we want guys out of there. We want to go put them in bubble wrap and wait them for next week. But once you start to go there, bad things happen a lot. And he was asked about the 2021 game against Detroit. And here's Shanahan's quote. That's huge. It was, I think, 41-17 with 1:58 left. And they had the ball with 17 seconds, 20 yards away, down 8 points, 1 score. So that's a lot more than that was. And that's a personal situation. But I see it happen a lot in a lot of places in the NFL. That was the biggest one. That was like never again, because I took out a lot of people out, and I still can't believe how that happened. I've had to go back and keep watching it because it doesn't sound believable, but it is. But to me in particular, I've seen things get out of hand and close, but nothing as scary as that Detroit one. All right. Totally fair statement. If I and I'm sure a lot of you as fans remember that Detroit game, I'm sure Shanahan and the coaching staff who was there in 2021 remembers it as well. And I said, this is not college football. You only have 53 actives. You can't really go that deep in any one position to rest your starters. But what I'm saying is you don't have to make wholesale changes. You don't have to take all 11 starters out on offense or defense, and you can phase it. If it's the beginning of the fourth quarter and you want to rest McCaffrey, take him out. Take one of Debo or Ayuk out. Maybe you take a Kittle or a Trent Williams out, right? So you still have 8 of 11 starters. Drive the ball, see what happens. You score, you punt. All right, fine. Now defense, same sort of thing. Maybe you take a Bosa and a Hargrave out on the line. Maybe you just take Warner out. Maybe you just take one corner, sit Ward, and maybe you just take one safety, right? So even if you just take one out at every level, so safety, corner, linebacker, and D-line, you still have 11 of your starters in. I think that's enough to contain and control a team like Pittsburgh that wasn't showing you anything other than the last 2 minutes of the first half at 27-7. The Lions in 2021 already showed, they scored 17 points. They wound up, I believe, getting an onside kick. So that has nothing to do with the defense if you're getting an onside kick. You can slowly take, I don't want to say your most important players out on offense and defense first, but I guess that's who I listed. And then if, a drive or two goes by on defense and now there's less time on the clock, take somebody else out. Take another corner out. Take another D-10 or D-tackle or D-lineman out. Take a linebacker out. If nothing else, right, it gets backup players playing time and valuable reps that a lot of these, or more reps. It seems like everybody on defense played. They could be playing a little bit more. And if you see, it's not like the emergency, QB3 rule that if he comes in, the other two players can't come back in, the QB1 and QB2, unless I guess QB3 gets hurt. And then you're like, all right, QB1, QB2, who's less hurt? Who can go out there? You still can put your starters or phase your starters back in on both sides of the ball. So I understand what Shanahan is saying. I really do. But I think there's a way that you can do it, that you can have the best of both worlds. You can still feel like you are protecting some players, slowly taking them out, seeing how the game goes. If you're getting a 3-and-out stop on defense and back to your offense, take a couple players out. See if you can grind the clock with a Mitchell or a Mason, or if you're going to throw it. I mean, I guess you leave Purdy in. He's the one that probably needs to stay in just from an offensive efficiency standpoint, as much as we might not be wild about that. But I do think there's a way that they could have, the best of both worlds. And we'll see for upcoming games, if a game is in hand in the fourth quarter, if Shanahan takes that approach. Based on his quotes, I wouldn't necessarily bet on it, but if anybody knows Shanahan and want to pass him the link to this podcast, just as that kind of thought, awesome. Chances are you don't know Kyle Shanahan personally, but you never know. So some housekeeping items. This week, the 49ers worked out a quarterback and 3 wide receivers. The quarterback the 49ers worked out was former Notre Dame quarterback Ian Book, who was a 2021 fourth-round pick of the Saints. Only played one game due to COVID restrictions, didn't fare all that well. To put to rest the nonsense by Twidiots out there and Reddit idiots, I don't know if that works combining it, they are not trading Sam Darnold, guys. They are not trading Sam Darnold because they're working out Ian Book and the Jets have an injury. They're just not. Ian Book is... Do you want Ian Book or Brandon Allen as your backup in case something happens to Purdy? And I know you're going to have a lot of chest-pounding fans. Sam Darnold is trash. I don't care. Anybody's better than Sam Darnold. And that almost sounds like a Jet fan because I live in the Northeast and I hear what Sports Talk Radio. It sounds like Brandon Allen and Ian Book are worse than Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold is the backup quarterback for a reason. Brandon Allen is number 3 for a reason. If any, the only reason this was done is the 49ers are probably housekeeping internally just to get more points of view on quarterbacks if later in the season, if an Allen gets hurt or a Darnold, and players can get hurt in practice. I mean, Christ, you can get hurt walking up or down the stairs. You could take a bad step and turn an ankle or something. So just to keep their quarterback file more updated. Now, the wide receivers were Dan Chisnia, Marcus Kemp, and Freddie Swain, all of which have special team experience. And seeing the kick return coverage units, I don't know how much one player signed and to the practice squad and maybe elevated for game day is going to matter, but they're going to need to get Jake Moody healthy to kick balls out of the end zone, because if you're going to be kicking it shallow into the end zone or anywhere in the field of play, chances are returners are going to move it past the 25-yard line on the 49ers special teams. So here's the thing. Let's move on to video games and something that you guys may not realize. So that I just found out, the longtime video game football franchise Madden, which has had cover athletes for close to 25 years now, and associated with that is the historic Madden curse. That generally, if you get nominated or recommended to be the cover athlete for Madden, it's because you had a really good season last year. And on a good number of years, when the curse hit, either the player got hurt, did not have a good season, fell off a cliff, something. So it's almost a dual-edged sword being the Madden cover athlete. This year it's Josh Allen. How'd he look week 1 against the Jets? Now, I know the Jets are going to be a top 3 to 5 defense in the league. But boy, was Josh Allen just throwing some deep balls up for grabs unnecessarily. How many years does he need to be a gunslinger before he gets a little bit more patience and just takes what the defense gives him? Not off to a great start. I don't envision that continuing week to week, but a 3-pick performance and should have had a 4th. One of the Jets linebackers dropped one. Not great, but you may not realize 1999 was the first time an NFL player was on the cover of the Madden video game box. Prior to that, it was only John Madden on it. And the first 49er player the first player in Madden 99, I gave it away, was a 49er player. And I'll pause for a couple seconds to see if you could guess who it was. Running back Garrison Hurst. So 1998, you still had Rice, you had Young, you had Owens. To a lesser degree, you had Stokes, and you still had some players on defense, like a Ken Norton and a Bryant Young, etc. Garrison Hurst had a really good year in 1998. He was an integral part of that wild card win over the Packers, where Terrell Owens made the catch 2 in the end zone with like 4 seconds to go from Steve Young to beat the Packers. Garrison Hurst played that game with a bad hamstring, and he was able to gut it out into the 4th quarter, the end of the 4th quarter, probably the tail end of the game, where his hamstring just went on, I don't know if it was a run or a screen pass, and he came hobbling off the field. And I have this game, it was on VHS, but I converted it to DVD, where I remember, so it was John Madden and Pat Summerall doing the broadcast, and as Hurst was coming off the field, grabbing his hamstring, I think he had to have gone over 100 yards that game. I remember John Madden saying, Garrison Hurst is a real man. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Garrison Hurst made the cover of Madden 99, because that was when we were in the throes of the all Madden team, and Madden was all about tough guys and tough players. And perhaps for John, Hurst was in the back of his mind that Packers game, but the first cover athlete was a 49er, and no 49er has been on it since. And given the curse, maybe that's a good thing. Now, in 1998, after that Packer game, Garrison Hurst, I think that was the year where they went to Atlanta in the divisional round, and he fractured his ankle and then was not on the field for the next year. So I don't know. So maybe, and if I'm getting the timeline wrong, I apologize. If I'm getting it right, I'll just conclude by saying maybe Garrison Hurst started the Madden curse because he had a great game, got hurt, then was the cover athlete. If I'm right on my timeline, something to think about. If I'm not, completely ignore it. So now let's go to the preview. The Niners at the Rams. Both teams 1-0. Early fight for the top of the NFC West. The 49ers are an 8.5-point favorite at Los Angeles, which I feel is high, which means if they were playing on a neutral site, the Niners are an 11.5-point favorite. And if they were in Santa Clara, 14.5 points. That feels high. Even if the Rams had dropped the game week 1 at Seattle, that would feel high. The fact that they dominated Seattle, to me, definitely feels high. So to recap, the Rams went to Seattle, dominated 30-13. They were down 13-7 at halftime, completely shut the Seahawks down to less than 15 yards in the second half and only 1 first down. They got to Geno Smith twice, both times, I believe, in the second half. Now, a lot of us know Kyle Shanahan's good record against Sean McVay, 9-4 overall. He's won the last 8 regular season games against McVay and the Rams. Obviously lost the one that mattered most, the 2021 NFC Championship game at Los Angeles. And last year's games against the Rams, the Niners won by at least 15 points. And the Rams team theoretically is weaker than what it was last year. No Cooper Kupp for at least the first 4 weeks. No Bobby Wagner. No Jalen Ramsey. They have some young players, we're going to talk about them, that stepped up at Seattle in week 1. But I think everybody needs to slow their roll a bit. And this, what I'm about to say next, I'm not too thrilled about. So the 49ers are wearing their red home jerseys at Los Angeles on Sunday. Now, given the Niners' record against the Rams overall, given how well the 49er faithful travel, especially to Los Angeles, it's not too far, obviously, from San Francisco. Long drive, but not a long flight at all. SoFi Stadium has been re-nicknamed Levi's South. Now, wearing red, is that tempting fate? I went into the whole karma Taylor Swift thing last year, and that was, or last week podcast, and that was in relation to me being an idiot with my car. But I'm not sure how I feel about this. Now, the home team, if I'm not mistaken, dictates what jersey they want to wear. So the Rams want to wear their white jerseys, which means if that's the case, then the 49ers are going to wear their dark jerseys. So the Rams are wearing their away jerseys, which means the Niners have to wear their home jerseys. Maybe McVay is feeling good getting a win week 1 in their white jerseys at Seattle. Maybe McVay is sending a message to his players saying, hey, this team has beaten us 8 straight games in the regular season. They won here last year. Their fans are taking over. You're going to see a lot of red in the stands. I want you guys to know on every snap that the 49ers and their fans think this is their home field. So I'm going to let them wear their red jerseys as a reminder. Is there a possibility it's not that deep and that calculated? Of course. And I'm probably reading more into this, me being superstitious, me being super conservative, me being one that doesn't want to tempt fate in any way, which is why any trash talk on social media or guys and gals that are Niner fans, choke it back this week, right? Choke it back. And this is hard for me to say because when I was younger, being competitive in video games or sports, I was a pretty big trash talker to the point where people used to take cheap shots at me on the field, on the court, whatever. But I didn't care. I mean, I would trash talk even if I was losing, just to do it and have fun. And usually it's playing against friends, so no one's really getting that upset about it. And you know, guys in their teens or 20s, you know, we're all dicks. We're assholes, especially to friends. You know, you could be more of an asshole to a friend than you could to a stranger because you don't know if that stranger's going to knock you out. I would just say everybody chill out until game day. And then if whatever you want to say and yell at your TV and pound your chest, awesome. But again, karma could be a bitch, so I'm not going to attempt it. Now, as for the Rams, I mentioned some young players. So rookie receiver Puka Nacua out of BYU and young receiver Tutu Atwell, either a second or third year receiver, each had 119 yards at Seattle against Legion of Boom 2.0 without Cooper Kupp really drawing any double teams or having them to rotate any coverage. So you would think Seattle, you know, they're going to play a fair amount of zone, but was playing them man up. And there were, you know, a couple times where Nacua ran by their Seattle's, I'm drawing a blank on his name, tall and fast corner Tariq Woolen, and Woolen runs, I think, like a sub 340. Nacua is someone that Kyle Shanahan says recommends, reminds him of Juwan Jennings being big and physical. Nacua obviously has more speed than Juwan Jennings, but the Rams offense, if these two young players can step up again, along with tight end Tyler Higbee, running backs Cam Akers and Kyron Williams, were productive. Again, I think they only ran 40 times for 70 or 80 yards. It was under 100 yards. Not a lot, but McVay showed the commitment to the run, which I'm sure he's going to again to slow down the 49ers pass rush and take some of the pressure off of the O-line, Stafford, and his young receiving core. Now on defense, the Rams run a 3-4, and their three down linemen are anchored by all-world Aaron Donald. They have some active linebackers. Cornerbacks are Darian Kendrick and Akilo Witherspoon, who the 49ers know well, who's had fits of inconsistency with some solid play, and safety Jordan Fuller. And that was an active, good defense against an explosive Seattle offense at home that in no way should be discounted. Just because the Niners have won 8 in a row doesn't really mean a whole lot to me. And you can flip it and say, well, yeah, well, Al, just because the Rams dominated Seattle, that's week 1. Week 2 is a different animal. That's fair. But the tape that the Niners and Kyle Shanahan and Steve Wilkes are going to look at is going to be impressive tape for a young Rams team that got confidence out of week 1 manhandling the Seattle Seahawks. Now, keys for San Francisco: protect Brock Purdy. They're going to move Aaron Donald all around on the line. And obviously the matchup you want is going to be on the right-hand side of the line with Spencer Burford and Colton McKivitz. Burford, the lowest ranked offensive player per Pro Football Focus in week 1. And we know the struggles McKivitz had against TJ Watt. Donald is going to give the line problems. We'll see how the Rams are going to be sending either a fourth player, an outside linebacker, or if they're going to blitz 5, or how they're going to stunt. But keeping Purdy clean, protecting him, it's paramount every week. And this is probably going to be a key to the game for all teams that have good pass rushers, or just in general, to keep the 49ers ahead of the sticks and to keep Purdy in a rhythm. Now, defensively, San Francisco needs to make the Rams one-dimensional. And yes, 10 rushes for 41 yards last week against the Steelers was great. Part of that had to do with San Francisco getting out to a lead, getting 3 and outs, and Pittsburgh essentially abandoning the run. I don't see McVay abandoning the run. I mean, unless the Niners are, again, 20-0, 23-0. Even then, to keep the Niners honest, to keep the pass rush in check, I could see the Rams running the ball 30 plus times. But if they can make the Rams one-dimensional, again, even if they're only running for 1 or 2 yards, you have to respect it because you have to respect play action. But if they can do that, the Niners can play coverage. And if they can stop the run with 4 or 5, that means you can drop 6 or 7 to cover these young Rams receivers. Now, with that, when the Rams are going to pass, get to Stafford. He looked good against Seattle. Seattle didn't generate a pass rush at all. I don't think they got to him for any sacks. Stafford can be rattled. We've seen it against the Niners, and I've seen it other games where Stafford has been part of the Rams' offense. If the Niners can get there with 4, great. And if they can get there with 5 or 6 and hold coverage, that's fine too. Make Stafford aware of where Bosa is, where Hargrave is. If Drake Jackson has another good game, Cleveland Ferrell, Kerry Hyder, Eric Armstead, Kinlaw, make him uncomfortable. That could change in some ways how McVay calls the game or the second half, especially if the 49ers get up. And on offense, I think the 49ers again need to have 32 or more rush attempts. It keeps the offense balanced. It keeps the defense off balance. The 49ers didn't run a ton of play action against Pittsburgh, but it's part of their offense, and it's part of leaking a Kittle out, a Juszczyk, an Ayuk or a Debo in motion. And last year, remember, the magic number of runs was 40, that if the Niners got to 40, they were going to win the game. They can get to 40 against the Rams, I think they're going to win that game. And if you're going to run the ball, let's just say 35 times, it's got to be less than 20 for McCaffrey, 10-ish for Mitchell, and 5+ for Mason. Keep everyone fresh, spell them, and even if this game does not get away from the Rams the way it got away from the Steelers, rotate your backs, Kyle. Hopefully, I don't want to say hopefully, but maybe it was solely because Mitchell was still banged up. But if that's the case again, I don't know why Mason didn't get any carries. Rotate your backs. You can increase the volume of your carries, and you're giving them different looks. McCaffrey's the smallest back on the roster, and Jordan Mason is your thumper. And then you have Mitchell, who's a hard runner somewhere in between. I think this is going to be closer than a lot of people think. I think this is going to be actually closer than the spread indicates. For all reasons that we saw last week, the Niners played really well. It's week 1. Fluky stuff happens week 1, right? I mean, the Giants got shut out. The weather didn't help, but I don't know if anyone thought the Giants were going to lose 40-0. I don't know if anyone thought the Niners were going to dominate. I don't know if anyone thought that the Browns were going to beat up on the Bengals or the Rams were going to beat up on Seattle. Week 1 is hard and usually the flukiest week in an NFL season. Pittsburgh's probably not as bad as they showed. Who knows if the Niners are as good as they showed? Seattle's probably not as bad as they showed. And I don't know if the Rams are as good as they looked in Seattle. Much like anything in life, the truth is somewhere in between in the gray areas. All that being said, I do believe the 49ers take 9 consecutive regular season games over the Rams, but I will say it's going to be under what the 8.5 point spread is, and I can see this being a 27-20 49ers victory to propel them to 2-0. But again, now, do I feel more confident in this game than week 1? Yes, I'm picking the Niners. Week 1, I picked the Steelers. Do I still have some dread and hesitation, even with the players that aren't playing for the Rams? Yes, and it's unfounded, ridiculous stuff. The red jerseys, the 8 in a row. At some point, that streak is going to snap, right? Shanahan is not going to continue to go undefeated against Sean McVay. I think even the most pie-in-the-sky, blue-sky, optimistic, unrealistic 49er fan can say at some point McVay is going to get a win. I hope it's not this week. I don't think it's going to be this week. And it would be great for the Niners to get off to an 0-2 start, especially with the Rams getting this week 1 win and Seattle at Detroit, which is going to be a tough task, which we are going to talk about in the plus section. But for now, that concludes the 49ers section of the podcast. Please stick around. We're going to be talking misery of the New York Giants and New York Jets. We're going to talk the next iteration of Inside the NFL, Star Wars Ahsoka Episode 5, and conclude with Week 2 NFL picks. Stay right here.
It's plus time.
So let's start talking Giants and Jets not having the start to their season that they wanted to. Sunday night, the national football TV audience got to see the Giants get absolutely obliterated 40-0 on a soggy night at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. Jet fans were probably mocking Giant fans, saying, oh, way to lose to a division rival, 40-0. Daniel Jones, $40 million a year. You lost by 40 points. It's our year. It's the Jets, and I think a lot of New York papers and probably fans thought that this was more a potential Jets year than a Giants year. And the Jets were ready with the Bills coming in September 11th, weekend or on that Monday, the Remembrance, playing in the tri-state area. And the Jets afterwards basically said to the Giants, here, hold my beer. We're the Jets. We can't have anything nice, and it's going to be a mess. And who would have thought that Jets fans feel worse about their team after beating the Bills than Giant fans feel about their team after getting shellacked by the Cowboys? And we know the reason why. Aaron Rodgers rupturing his Achilles. He is done for the year. Now, we've seen the tackle the injury multiple times, and if you're on social media, you get to see different views on it, etc. What I will say is, do we really know for certain it was the turf? The way Rodgers is scrambling and planting his foot and lurching forward and getting tackled from behind, the force of all of that happening was the reason why the Achilles snapped. The reason why artificial turf, or if they call it grassy turf or whatever the name is, has those rubber pellets in it, is to provide a little bit of slickness so cleats don't dig into the turf so much. So your foot will essentially pop up in situations like that. It didn't happen, unfortunately, for Rodgers. And MetLife's turf came under a lot of heat the past couple of years. And 2020 was the year where there were multiple ACLs by the Niners when they played here in the 2020 COVID season. And turf in general obviously gets a bad rap. And MetLife has recently replaced the turf, but Aaron Rodgers had a calf injury early in training camp. He's 39 years old. Things tend to take longer to heal the older you get. Any of us that are in your 30s or 40s or older can testify to that. On top of that, you are trying to run and you have a big, strong man on top of you tackling you, and you're trying to fight away. Similar to Jimmy Garoppolo's injury last year against the Dolphins. He was trying to fight for extra yardage and carry, I think it was 2 Dolphins with him, and his foot went. Severe sprain. I don't remember if he broke anything. But Rodgers had a calf injury, like Kevin Durant did the year he was with the Golden State Warriors and wound up tearing his Achilles in the finals. Turf is not 100% to blame. Now remember, Breece Hall tore his ACL against the Broncos, and that's a grass field. Turf injuries are usually, now I'm not saying 100%, so I'm using the term usually, when that could be anywhere from 51 to 99%, non-contact. Someone putting their cleat in the ground, trying to cut, and your ankle or your knee or your hip, something doesn't go the way that you want it to, given the force of the run and the cut and torque and all that stuff. People that are complaining about the turf, I get it. Is there the possibility, if that was a grass field, that Aaron Rodgers' cleat would have kicked up the grass and come loose, and that might not have happened? Absolutely. But he also might have tore it. Like, There's nothing that's going to guarantee anything in such a violent sport. Now, the NFLPA has come out and said they're recommending that all fields go to natural grass. I think 14 or 15, roughly half of the fields are turf or grass in the league. It's much more expensive for ownership to maintain a grass field, especially depending on the location of the country. And more teams are moving to dome type stadiums, the Rams, the Vikings, and you're generally going to have turf there. And when the World Cup comes to North America, and people started using this, when the World Cup soccer tournament comes in, whether it's 2025, 2026, all fields that have turf will be replacing the turf with grass for the World Cup. And if people are saying, see, you can do it for the World Cup, guys, that's for like a couple weeks. We're not talking about 18 weeks. That's a lot different. You have to recognize that. Now, what I like in the whole Jets situation too, and it's unfortunate, is if you're a parent and you have 3 boys, your house is always like shit. Things are always breaking. You buy a new sofa, they're jumping on it like crazy. Food on the walls, food on the ground. Things are just generally not good. You can't have nice things if you have 3 boys. I have 2 boys, and I understand that mentality. Couldn't imagine if I had a 3rd boy, and I know people that do, and God bless you. But I can't imagine it. Not with what 2 looks like. That's what it's like being a Jets fan. Jets fans, I'm so sorry about the injury happening. They must feel like they can't have nice things. And I don't know how many people going into that game, the most pessimistic of Jet fans, were waiting for the other shoe to drop. And the shoe dropped 4 plays into the game. Now, is it Zach Wilson's team, for better or worse? Tim Boyle was on the practice squad. He's going to be elevated to the number 2 quarterback. The Jets are his 4th team in 5 years, and his career line is 66 of 106 for 574 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. Tim Boyle is not the answer. However, they're not asking him to be the answer. Right now, it's Zach Wilson's team. Yes, he's been with Robert Saleh for 3 years. He had a different offensive coordinator the first 2 years. Now it's Nathaniel Hackett, who was really brought in to work with Rodgers. But if he's a competent offensive coordinator, and I'm sure he is, he was just a wildly incompetent head coach, he will tailor the offense to what Zach Wilson is comfortable doing. Did Wilson look like crap last year? Yes. Could he look like the same crap this year? Yes. But we can be optimistic or even logical saying he could get better over time. It may not look as good week 2, 3, 4 that it might look in weeks 5, 6, and 7. Now, if we want to talk quarterback options, there are no real great options out there. And I read something about, well, maybe the Jets don't want to bring someone in and upset the chemistry in the locker room. The fact that they have Zach Wilson is a negative in that column already, right? Like, players gave up on him. They didn't believe in him last year. You can't bring anybody in that's going to have a worse effect on the locker room than what Zach Wilson did with his sense of entitlement and how important he thought he was and banging moms and whatever. Hopefully he matured this year. But here's who you're looking at from an undrafted free agent standpoint. Carson Wentz, Colt McCoy, Joe Flacco, Nick Foles, or Chase Daniels. Flacco, to me, would be at the bottom of the list. Even though he was with the team last year, different offense, and he's the oldest one. Carson Wentz, obviously, most talented of those 5. Doesn't have a history of being a great teammate, but again, can he be worse than Zach Wilson? I don't think so. Colt McCoy, veteran, like 33, 34, can show promise to back up Wilson if things just aren't going right. And I feel the same could be said about a Nick Foles or a Chase Daniels. And why I made a case of no quarterback coming in could have a worse effect on the locker room or the team is because guess who else is an option and who reached out to the Jets after the injury happened? Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick's not a bad guy. He's not going to come in here and start cursing people or throwing anything under the bus. The whole Colin Kaepernick thing was about the kneeling and the social justice and whatever. Colin Kaepernick hasn't been in the league for 6 seasons. That's a problem. But could he be, and of everybody else that I read, plus Zach Wilson, plus Tim Boyle, could he be the most explosive offensively option of that group? Yes. Does he need to learn the offense? Yes. Is this offense going to be ground and pound no matter who the quarterback is? Also, yes. But I don't think Kaepernick should be totally discounted. Will the media be, all over him maybe the first week or two that he signed as a backup? Sure. That'll fade. The Kaepernick fad of being back in the league, that will fade. And the Jets were on Hard Knocks, for Christ's sake. It's not like they're not used to distractions or hype or people gunning for them because of the Aaron Rodgers thing. And you have players coming out on defense saying they're going to be like the 85 Bears. Don't tell me the Kaepernick distraction is going to be too much. The Jets brought this on themselves. And now they have a quarterback that's going to be leading the offense that had that sense of entitlement thing that defenders are going to be throwing at him when something doesn't go right. A whole lot of trash talking happens on an NFL field. Is Kaepernick the answer? No, but I think he's as good of an answer as anyone else that I mentioned as an undrafted free agent. A better answer than Tim Boyle, and possibly in time, maybe a better answer than Zach Wilson. Maybe. Now, I went and looked at other teams' rosters. The only other player maybe you take a look at on the Lions practice squad is David Blau. He has starting experience for the Lions for a couple games. They can just sign him from the Lions practice squad. If you want to carry 3 quarterbacks on your active roster, you might as well, right? You're not a Super Bowl team anymore. Now you're fighting for a wild card. And to have another option at quarterback if Zach Wilson ain't it, or Zach Wilson's the reason why you're losing, I don't think Wilson's going to be the reason why they win. It's going to be the defense and the running game. But if Zach Wilson's the reason why you're losing, you need to have a quick hook. The other route that they could go, to me, is talk to the Colts. Try to trade for Gardner Minshew. Any of these players will not be the answer against Dallas, and they will not be the answer probably for a month. 4 games until they get acclimated to the offense. But you want to, if you're going to pull the trigger on a third quarterback, you got to do it quick. And we're going to go over the schedule coming up for the Jets. Why I say Minshew from the Colts? Because it's Anthony Richardson's team. That team is going nowhere. They're gonna ride him all year unless he gets hurt or is wildly, wildly ineffective to give him the experience he needs. Plus, they still have Sam Ehlinger as a backup. In the same light, the Texans. CJ Stroud is your starter. See if you can pry Case Keenum away or Davis Mills. It's going to be Stroud's team to learn and grow. They have 3 quarterbacks on the roster. Either one, and maybe it's harder to get Davis Mills because he has a lot of starting experience and they want a solid backup just in case. Case Keenum's a nice option. Anybody I mentioned is better than Tim Boyle. Anybody I mentioned, or everybody I should say. And who knows what Zach Wilson's going to be. Now here's the schedule the Jets have. At Dallas this week, at home for New England, at home for the Chiefs, at Denver, and versus Philadelphia. Those are all 5 games the Jets could lose. Best case scenario, they win 2. If they can go 3-3 in their first 6, maybe you even take 2-4, you're happy to tread water because later on in the season, you are at the Giants, winnable, at the Raiders, winnable, at home for the Falcons, at home for the Texans, at home for the Redskins, winnable. So if the thought is, let's tread water with Zach Wilson until he gets more comfortable and more experience, okay. But you can tread water with him and still bring in someone else. I mean, they're going to. There is no way they're going with just Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle. That might be the worst quarterback room in the history of the NFL. That might not even be hyperbole to say that. They got to bring in a third. Don't go cheap on it. Bring in someone that is, if Zach Wilson ain't it, and you lose your next 3 of your next 4 or 2 of your next 3, and Zach Wilson's not looking good, then that third quarterback will have had the time to acclimate, learn the playbook, and you move forward with this other option that maybe could be the reason why you're not losing. At this point, the Jets quarterback just has to be the reason they're not losing. And with that defense, maybe they could grab that 5th or 6th playoff spot, that 2nd or 3rd wild card spot. The AFC is tough. The whole AFC East is tough. You have the Chiefs, and I know the Chargers lost, but they're going to be a good team. Who knows what the Raiders or Broncos are going to be? The Ravens won. The Browns won. The Bengals should still be good. And in the South, it's just going to be the Jags, but the Titans could make some noise for a wild card. It's going to be tough, but get someone in there soon. I haven't checked. I'm recording this on a Thursday. I haven't checked if the Jets signed anybody yet, and they're going to. But these are the names that I think. And listen, a trade, if Trey Lance went for a 4th-round pick, Gardner Minshew should be a 5th or 6th. Case Keenum a 6th or 7th. Like, you can get a quarterback that's had significant starting experience cheap. Go out there, Jets. Don't let this season get away because on the possibility that Zach Wilson hasn't improved at all. So let's transition to the iconic football show inside the NFL. This was a series on HBO from 1977 to 2008. When I was younger growing up, this was, must-see TV for me. Remember the hosts being Len Dawson, Nick Bonacani. You had Gary Myers as the reporter that was brought on every week. It was a show that from 2008 to 2021 transitioned to Showtime from HBO. Then after 2021 went to Paramount Plus, the streaming service. And now it's on the CW, which in the Northeast is, or at least I have Optimum, is Channel 11. And the hosts are Ryan Clark. They're all former players. Ryan Clark, Chad Johnson, formerly of the Bengals, Chris Long, Channing Crowder, and quarterback Jay Cutler. This show just feels cheap and completely unnecessary. It's not living up to the heritage of Inside the NFL, the hosts and former players and reporters that have previously been on it. Chad Johnson was essentially wearing a tracksuit, and it's not like people need to be wearing suits or tuxes or dressed to the nines, but Chad Johnson, we know you got money. Not because you were a former NFL player, although that helps, is because I've read articles of how cheap you were. You used to buy fake gold and diamond jewelry. You used to sleep in the stadium. I don't know if that means you didn't have a home, but preserving your wealth, which is, good for you, much like Rob Gronkowski saying that he hasn't touched a penny of his NFL money yet. It's been all endorsement money. Then you have Jay Cutler, who was more articulate than I thought he would be, since he's a guy that just, always has a resting bitch face. And I can't get out of my head, for anybody that knows this, the smokin' Jay Cutler websites and memes that were going on while he was still playing. Now, if you haven't seen that was essentially Jay Cutler in a Bears uniform or Broncos or whoever he was playing with. And just that look on his face, someone photoshopped, cigarettes into dozens of pictures, if not more, of Jay Cutler. And it's just very fitting. It's like the look that you see. It's like someone that's like just disgusted or just doesn't give a shit, having a smoke. Almost similar to, remember the movie Old School at the end, where Vince Vaughn, was it Luke Wilson and others had to perform multiple athletic or academic feats to get their club, I'm drawing a blank on, whatever, their Greek fraternity accredited. And Vince Vaughn was on the rings that a gymnast would be on, and he was smoking at the time. That kind of look. And it's jarring for me, at least, to see Jay Cutler, not with a cigarette in his mouth. I'm probably in the minority on that. And who knows, maybe this guy needs the money. He's divorced now from Kristen Cavallari. And I thought I read somewhere that he froze assets or withheld a certain amount of money from her. But who knows, maybe this guy needs the money, but it feels vanilla. It feels cheap and generic, but if you're on the CW, this is probably what general audiences are looking for. There's no deep dives into anything. There's no, that iconic football background music when showing highlights. There's no narrator even going over the highlights like you used to have on Inside the NFL. You're getting audio clips from like players and coaches like during the game or after the game, and that's great. But it doesn't have that dramatic, the slow motion runs and stuff. It doesn't have the dramatic feel that at least what I was used to growing up. And yeah, maybe me being a kid, a preteen, teenager, etc., thought that was cool, but I still think it's cool. It just adds a weight, a gravitas to the production that this currently doesn't have. Where are the NFL reporters? Where are the NFL insiders? I guess it's Ryan Clark, since he's also on ESPN. And listen, just because they're all NFL players doesn't mean that they don't know what they're talking about. They're all knowledgeable, but just maybe some different perspectives from folks in different industries or professions would help. And now the fact that it's on the CW, I don't know how much these guys are getting paid to do it. It can't or shouldn't be a lot, just given what I imagine the ratings are. And I'm not hating on the five guys doing it at all. I was surprised to see that. I forgot that I knew it was on Showtime. I didn't watch it. I haven't watched it probably since, I don't know, college, a couple years post-college. Didn't watch it on Paramount Plus. If it's on the CW and I'm flipping around, will I check it out a little bit? Sure, but it feels like just a wildly unnecessary show, especially when you compare it to what it used to be. Now, just a quick update on the Star Wars show Ahsoka. I know many of you probably aren't watching it, but it's my podcast, so I'm going to talk about what I want. And episode 5 of Ahsoka was, I think, a good and interesting one that pulled at the nostalgia, if you want to call it heartstrings or energy, of folks that have been with Star Wars, maybe not necessarily, your whole lives, but at least from the prequel trilogy, 1999 on. And why I said that is because the show brought back Anakin Skywalker, played by Hayden Christensen, who played him in Attack of the Clones in 2002 and Revenge of the Sith in 2005. And he was there in this otherworldly place called the World Between Worlds, where he and his former apprentice, Padawan Ahsoka Tano, were having a conversation and some lightsaber battles. And they went back in their past from the cartoon TV show The Clone Wars and relived parts of the Clone Wars when Ahsoka was young. And by young, we're talking like early to mid-teens. And the actress who played Ahsoka was the actress who played the young Gamora from the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Infinity War, Thanos' daughter. And she played Ahsoka really well with the mannerisms. And I think in live action, because I watched a lot of the Clone Wars cartoon series, which essentially takes place between episode 2 and episode 3. So Anakin Skywalker is still good. He doesn't turn to Darth Vader yet. And I think in live action, it's jarring to see how young Ahsoka was as a Padawan to being thrust into a war like this and killing people. They also showed a battle from the Siege of Mandalore, where she had to kill other Mandalorians when the Empire took that over. And it was a learning lesson from Anakin to Ahsoka, because she doesn't want to be a warrior and that violent. And sometimes you have to be what life in the situation calls for. But what was the really interesting part about this episode was Anakin and Ahsoka have lightsaber duels, a few times, because he wanted the lesson to be, wanting to live or die. And essentially Ahsoka chooses life, and she's able to disarm Anakin. And Anakin starts out dueling her with his blue lightsaber. Then they go to some flashbacks, and they had a really cool shot of Anakin and young Ahsoka talking on the battlefield, and Anakin kind of moves, forward into the distance, with the clone troopers attacking the separatists, and there's smoke and kind of like gunfire and lightning that flashes, and you see Anakin with his blue lightsaber. Then it flashes to Darth Vader in his gear and cape with a red lightsaber, and then flashes again to Anakin with his blue lightsaber. It was just a really cool shot. And then as they get out of those flashbacks and come back to this netherworld, this world between worlds, he kind of glitches a bit between the human Anakin and the cyborg Darth Vader, and then now is fighting Ahsoka with his red lightsaber, which is just cool because you never saw the human being Anakin Skywalker with a red lightsaber. Now I'm being like a total Star Wars geek, etc. Nostalgia works when you do it right. And I know a lot of people didn't watch the Clone Wars cartoon show, don't really know who Ahsoka was, but I did. I'm not one of those like rabid Ahsoka fans or Anakin fan or anything like that, but it's cool to see cartoon characters becoming live action, cartoon situations like the Clone Wars cartoon show becoming live action. And I got to give Hayden Christensen the nod. This was his best acting that he's ever been in Star Wars. And he was in the Obi-Wan series with Ewan McGregor from last year. And obviously he was in episode 2 and episode 3. And he is 20 years older, thereabouts now. But it just also goes to show that the material he was given, people complain about the wooden dialogue and George Lucas can't direct human beings. He's more interested in special effects. And I agree with all of that. I mean, how do you make Ewan McGregor and Natalie Portman and Samuel L. Jackson and others bad actors and actresses? But George Lucas did that. And people that say, well, that's okay, Star Wars is campy. No, Star Wars does not need to be campy. It was a little bit campy because the first one came out in the 1977, but in 1999 and 2002 and 2005, shit doesn't still have to be campy. That's just George Lucas not really being a high-end director and not being able to direct actors well, nor write strong dialogue. I know that's my opinion, but it feels like a fact. But Hayden Christensen was great in this. They de-aged him where they needed to, and then showed him a little bit older also. But I don't think he was, because he's in his like early 40s now. I don't think they really showed him true to age. And I think the coolest part about this was they showed this episode in select movie theaters. This kind of goes back to me saying, Netflix and other streamers, whether it's the next season, the next premiere of Stranger Things, or the series finale of Stranger Things, or when House of the Dragon comes back on, or Amazon Prime when Rings of Power come back on, even though I know that's panned by a lot of people, have it play in a theater. Even if it's for that night or a week. I think and I was looking to see if, I wasn't going to drive more than 10 minutes, the 2 local theaters in my town. If they had it, I would have gone. I'm not that much of a Star Wars super fan that I feel like I need to go to these things, but it would have been a cool event because you would have been there with other interested fans that would have been cheering and really into it. And this was the episode to be into, considering how they pulled Hayden Christensen and Anakin back in and some of the shots that they had. It would have been a really cool episode to see with other people that would have been really into it. I would not have been sitting there cheering. I just don't have that in me, but there is a nice buzz and an energy in a movie theater, whether you're seeing a Star Wars movie or a Marvel movie or whatever it may be, when fans get into it. It adds to the experience. And I don't know if any other episodes for Ahsoka will be like that or other shows, but I am a big proponent, one, of the fan experience, and 2, if you're a streamer and you feel like you're hemorrhaging money, make some money off it. It's not going to be a ton, but something like a Stranger Things season or series premiere, have it premiere a couple days early or a week early. Fans are going to go, and the people that are going to bitch about, well, I have Netflix, why should I spend $10? Well, if you're a big enough fan, what's an extra $10? And to be amongst people that enjoy it as much as you do. So Ahsoka's got 3 episodes left. They have not introduced Grand Admiral Thrawn yet, but the episode ends with Ahsoka and her robot companion basically going, getting ingested not digested, but just ingested by one of those large space whales, purgles, and they all jump to hyperspace. And obviously they're going to be jumping to where the bad guys and Sabine Wren wound up jumping to another galaxy last episode. So I'm hoping we get to see more of Grand Admiral Thrawn starting in episode 6 versus just a teaser in the last episode or two. So let me jump off my Star Wars fandom, geekdom, and let's conclude with week 2 NFL picks. Last week, my record was 9-7, above 500, but not great. And I guess that I could have had 10 wins if I had picked the Niners, but I just wasn't feeling great that week 1 game. But games start tonight. I'm recording this on a Thursday. Minnesota at Philadelphia starts your Amazon Prime Video slate. Philadelphia should win this game handily. Then we transition to Sunday games. Green Bay at Atlanta, two teams that had some good wins. Week 1, Atlanta was at home for Carolina. Green Bay was at Chicago. I think right now Green Bay feels like the more complete team, and I trust Jordan Love more than I trust Desmond Ridder. Vegas at Buffalo. Vegas getting a good win on the road week 1 at Denver. Buffalo falling at the Jets. I think Buffalo rebounds and really puts the clamps down on that Vegas offense to get the victory. Baltimore at Cincinnati. Cincinnati, again, looked terrible at home against Cleveland. Baltimore looked good at home, albeit against the Texans. I think the Bengals not finally, it's only been, a week or, the first game. They right the ship and they get a victory against the Ravens. Seattle at Detroit. Detroit, we really didn't talk about the big win Thursday night to kick off the season at Kansas City. Seattle looked terrible at home against the Rams. I think the teams kind of more play to where they actually are at this week, and I think it's enough that the Lions, with a revamped defense, and Seattle just looked all out of sorts, and I think Lions fans will be there en masse week 2, home opener, to see the Lions go 2-0 in the NFC North. Chargers at the Titans. Both teams lost week 1. Chargers at home against the Dolphins. Tennessee at the Saints. I think the Chargers are just the better, more explosive team here and get the victory. Bears at the Bucks. Bears looked all sorts of bad, and they're going to need Justin Fields to take much more of a leap as an actual quarterback and not an athlete pretending to be a quarterback to have a chance this season. And Tampa Bay surprised week 1 at Minnesota. And I think I don't want to say continue to surprise, but I think they get off to a 2-0 start beating the Bears. Kansas City at Jacksonville. This is one where Jacksonville is just ripe to pull off the upset. 1-0. Kansas City losing at home against the Lions. They get Chris Jones back. They should be getting Travis Kelce back. And I think this is going to be a good competitive game, but for those reasons, I will take the Chiefs at Jacksonville. Indianapolis at Houston, far and away the worst game on the docket. I think Houston showed some good fight being at home for their opener. I think they do enough to edge another a battle of the rookie quarterbacks, Anthony Richardson versus CJ Stroud. I'll take the Texans. Niners at the Rams, already picked the Niners. Giants at Arizona. The Cardinals acquitted themselves well at Washington, which was just another bad game for week 1, and the Giants obviously looked terrible. This could be a sloppy, ugly game, but I think the Giants are the more talented team and will win at Arizona. The Jets at Dallas. The Jets defense will keep them in every game all season long. It's just a matter of how long can that defense keep them in games for. And the Cowboys have a comparable defense to the Jets, but a much better offense. They will beat the Jets. Washington at Denver. Boring-ish game. No real huge interest in the Commanders or the Broncos any which way other than having Terry McLaurin on 2 of my fantasy teams. But I think Denver at home gets the win. Miami at New England. New England was game against the Eagles after being down 16-0. They chipped away and had a chance in the fourth quarter. I just don't know how many answers the Patriots are going to have for the Dolphins offense. And I think Vic Fangio and the defense have a better showing against a team that's not nearly as explosive as the Chargers were last week. And that is your Sunday night game, Monday night, we have 2 games. Why? Because of capitalistic greed. And it's not the first time we're going to have 2 Monday night football games. I think there are 3 or 4 in total, and there might be another one actually next week. We start out at 7:15 on ESPN, the Saints at the Panthers. I stated last week that actually, maybe I didn't state it, but I'll just state it now. The Saints are going to win the NFC South. They have the best quarterback in the division. They might have the best defense in the division and maybe the best offensive weapons in the division as well, especially when Alvin Kamara comes back from his suspension. They will get the victory at Carolina. And then 8:15 on ABC, it's Cleveland at Pittsburgh. So for those of us that have picture-in-picture, and I've never used that feature before, I will have to attempt to. You get to watch 2 games at once, but again, this is just pure NFL greed. And, for folks that are Saints fan, Panthers, Browns, or Steelers, hey, you get to see your team on national television, in which if there was only one Monday night game, you might not have. So good for the fan bases. Cleveland looked good. I don't think they're as good as they showed against the Bengals. I don't think the Steelers are as bad as they looked against the Niners. I don't think the Steelers can afford to get into an 0-2 hole and have Cleveland be 2-0 with another division win. So I think the Steelers find a way and get their first victory of the year. And that concludes the podcast for this week. As always, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to listen to Niner talk, other football talk, Star Wars talk, and concluding with the picks. Football starts again tonight with the NFL. Eagles hosting the Vikings. There's going to be college football on tonight, tomorrow, and Saturday. We're going to get a good slate of games on Sunday. And as I said, 2 Monday night games. And there's still baseball going on, WNBA, and whatever else you enjoy watching, sports or otherwise. So whatever you're doing, enjoy it. And as I always say, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay safe. We will talk on Monday coming off of the 49ers, hopefully a win against the LA Rams at, like the kiddies say, Levi's South. Take care, everyone.